everyone, welcome to Reading with Eve, and let's get on with the bookish video. Today we're taking a deep dive into the backlog of Holly Jackson. I'm sure that you must have heard about her. She is a well-renowned YA thriller author at this point. This is the fourth video in this mini-series that I'm doing. I have so far done Karen M. McManus, Lucy Foley, and Ashley Winstead. Two of these authors I don't really read anymore, so I don't know if that tells you anything. I hope this is not a curse of some kind, but it takes me a little while to get these videos done and prepped. As I'm sure you can imagine, it involves reading their entire backlist, then doing a bit of an analysis on it, because I want to set these videos apart from my short form ones where I just go a bit more in depth on everything. So even if that means I only upload one, maybe two a year, it's, if I'm happy with it, then it's quality over quantity, right? So I will walk you through how this video will be structured, and then we'll begin. How this normally works, I just summarize the author's general stance in the creative industry in a couple of sentences, and I then go into a bit of an overview about their writing overall, any overarching themes in their work, if there is any, and then I look through their books in more detail and give you my personal ranking towards the end, because I go through them in publication order, and then I just share my star rankings and whatnot, because I think that makes it a bit less jumbled together. However, I just want to give you a couple caveats. Because half of Holly Jackson's work is a trilogy, I can't go into as much detail as I would like to, and as much detail as I went into some of my previous videos, because it would spoil the plot that would happen like in the first book and then in the second book if I talked about the second and third books respectively in like big detail. So I will try to give you just a little less detailed overview of just the series as a whole, spoiler free of course. I know that some people might be like, well, if I'm watching a deep dive, I know who this author is and I know their books, I've read them, but I always have to assume that someone is watching who hasn't read them, and I have to be fair to them because they might be interested. Oh, maybe I'll see what they write about and whatnot, what sort of characters they have in their books, and then I'll check out their work. I don't want to spoil anything. I know I can do like spoiler sections, but sometimes YouTube doesn't work properly, and you might get spoiled anyway, and I don't want that to happen. So I will do that, and I've not read her novella, which is a prequel to the trilogy, because I couldn't justify spending like £10 on a 60-page book or something like that. So I just had a bit of a look at the summary, and people said like you don't really miss anything out story-wise or character development-wise if you don't read it. It's just a bit of like fan service, visit your mist world with your favorite characters and whatnot. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Holly Jackson. Holly Jackson is 31 years old. She is British, and she actually wrote her first book at the age of 15. However, this was not A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, a book that launched her into YA thriller queen status stardom. So A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was published in 2019, and since then she's been steadily publishing one book a year, and she has her first adult thriller coming out next year, which I personally am very much looking forward to, but I couldn't really wait for it to be released and for me to get to it to make this video. So maybe in a few years time I'll update it with a part 2 or something. We'll see. So Holly Jackson, as I said, since she's only publishing her first adult thriller next year, so far she's only written YA. Her thrillers are mainly investigative mysteries that feature missing people or deceased people or some kind of an unsolved cold case. She has one survival thriller, which is kind of an outlier. I don't know how to pronounce that word correctly. Please let me know if you know. I know I could have checked it, but let's just move on. So yeah, it's not like the others, essentially. And then she always has so far written from a female POV. She likes to use some kind of mixed media aspect in her stories. It's a very big component in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, especially the first book. It's a big mark. She features headstrong, not necessarily always likable characters, but they are extremely complex and well developed. She's big on familial relationships. Family always plays a major part in her stories, whether they're directly involved with the plot or not. She always has some kind of romance going on, however, it doesn't overshadow the plot. I do feel like it's kind of a YA thing. If you're writing a YA thriller, there has to be some romance in it, but as I said, it is very in the background. It doesn't overtake the story. It's quite respectful. And her romances also have this trope that I can't really say because I'll spoil that plot line. But if you read her books, you know what I mean. They have this trope that is quite frustrating for people who want a certain kind of ending for her couples. She does tend to write male characters who are more there as a supporting role for the main character, which is quite a good thing, especially nowadays. But she doesn't like preach feminism or force it, it just comes naturally. She definitely has that small town dynamic in her books. All but one are set in a small town with like secrets and corruption and all that. And she also has an overarching theme of authorities crap, basically. And you can't really trust for them to always get it right and always do justice. It's not that black and white. And she does have a bit of a knack for some vigilante, I'll take this into my own hands, justice type of thing. So that is kind of like the very basic summary of what she does. And now let's talk about the books themselves. So, Good Girls Guide to Murder, as I said, it was published in 2019. It is 448 pages. Depending on edition, you might get like some pages here and there, but it is around 450 mark. And it follows Pip. She is a senior at her school, and for her project, she wants to look into a solved cold case. The case in question is Andy Bell, a popular girl in her school who went missing 5 years ago. Her body's never been found. However, her boyfriend at the time committed suicide shortly after she's gone missing. She went missing. Grammar is not my friend today. But the police decided it's simple. The case solved itself. It is 99% of the time the boyfriend. So he basically admitted his guilt and case closed. Done. Pip doesn't think so because she doesn't really have much faith in authority. As I said, an overarching theme. So she decides to conduct interviews, do her own research, and this is not some, I just happened to like stumble into the room and overheard something that conveniently solves everything. No, Pip is dedicated. She does research. She prepares. She is not afraid to piss people off, and God knows she pisses a lot of people off by digging into this. Powerful people who don't like their secrets being dug up. And she takes it very seriously. As far as the investigative aspect goes, you have the mixed media, you have her actually detailing what sort of research she does. You can tell that Holly Jackson has put a lot of thought into it. It's not the case of, I have this mystery and I have this twist and I don't know how to get to it, so I'll just fumble a bit and see where that takes me. She puts time and effort into it. And again, as I said, I have to be more vague than I'd like to be because spoilers, but as far as her solving this mystery, it shows Pip that her town is way more corrupt and way more messed up than she ever hoped. And it shows certain villainous figures that she didn't even imagine, like she couldn't even imagine what they were up to. And definitely lowers her faith in the justice system. And it also does interesting things to the whole perfect victim stereotype thing, because Auntie Belle was not a perfect girl that everyone made her out to be, which is an interesting topic because it's so we as a society, we have this uh almost like a subconscious thing, the perfect victim. And even in a lot of true crime cases, you hear victims being described as these beacons of sunshine who never did anything wrong. But then when it's not the case, you sometimes even see people in the comments on like true crime YouTubers videos, for example, saying, well, they were such a mess that, maybe they got involved in this situation and they somehow on some level had it coming, which is such a wrong thing to think. And this book and the series as a whole definitely challenges that stereotype, which I found quite refreshing. As I said, definitely the themes of authority, because Pip essentially gets no support and she's viewed as a nuisance, which, I mean, it is more common than you think in books, but here it was done really well where you could actually feel her frustration. And I really liked the whole uncovering certain things about people. It showed that you're not always going to get the justice that what's happening might deserve, and the people who are involved might deserve that justice. And it's really frustrating, but unfortunately it is very true to life. Now, Pip, as I said earlier on, her character is not always the most likable. She can be very, very one-track minded. She can be very sort of hard-hitting, hot-headed when it comes to getting what she wants and achieving her goal, which is, in this case, solving the case and gathering the research for it. She is very, very hardworking to the point where she forgets to eat and barely sleeps, and you just kind of like want to wrap her up and be like, relax, just for a little bit, please, chill out, So she definitely has those qualities that are necessary to do what's right and to solve this case. However, as I already said, she doesn't always go about it in the most gentle way because she pisses people off, and sometimes she lacks that tact. Sometimes she lacks that bit of an emotional understanding when to step back. And that makes her an imperfect protagonist because, maybe in some kind of Mary Sue world, she would be written as this, like, super determined, but also, like, super gentle soul. But it's not the case. Like, she wants the truth and she wants it now. And it's actually quite fascinating to watch, albeit a bit frustrating. There is an event that I will spoil for you that happens kind of like 2/3 into the book, because I know a lot of people, including myself, can be sensitive to that material. And it is Pip's family dog dies. And it's not a brutal scene or anything. It's not like extreme horror, but it is definitely upsetting. And it does provide that stake in the narrative that Pip realizes that she is going too far. So I'm just letting you know that that happens because how I ranked the book, it was despite of that as opposed to because of it. Because even though I understand why it was done, I still didn't enjoy it. I get that was the point, but you see what I mean here, right? So when it comes to that, when something happens to those she loves, even though sometimes she kind of loses herself in that one-track mind and forgets it, she reacts hard. She cares about those that she loves so much, and that's where her softness, and her humanity and her emotions shine when her loved ones' safety and lives are being threatened. That's when she goes into this shell because she doesn't want to hurt them, but then when she realizes she has to do something to protect them, she goes all out. And another character that I feel contributes to her development is Ravi, who is the brother of Andy Bell's boyfriend who committed suicide. Ravi also doesn't believe that his brother would ever have been capable of doing something like that. So he is very willing to help Pip with this investigation, and they enter a romance. And as I said, their romance is very understated. It adds to the story rather than detracts from it. But Ravi himself, he's not so much of a character of his own exactly. Well, he's developed, but like he's not the focus of the story, if you know what I mean. He is there to prop Pip's character up, and he is there to soften her rough edges a bit. Not in the sense of I'm gonna tame the shrew or whatever, but he is just there to anchor her to that emotional reality of you want to do this, but you still have people who care about you, and by not thinking of them, you're hurting them just as much as you're hurting yourself, sort of thing. He is there for her through everything, and I am not like big on romance or anything like that. You know, I don't really read it, but I found their relationship to be really sweet. And yeah, I think that his character is a really good addition to the whole thing. Pip's family and friends, they are definitely background characters, especially in the first book, but they also provide that development to Pip, you know, because she is happiest when she is with her loved ones, and she shows like that bit of a softer side to her as well, which is quite enjoyable to see, and it adds to those layers. Then we have Nat Da Silva, I think her name was, and she is, I can't really tell you much about her character without spoiling the plot, but I will say that her character provides this complexity of being a victim, but not wanting to admit that you are a victim, because then you would have to reframe something horrible that happened to you as a horrible thing. And it also kind of features a victim who is, for whatever reason, wanting to protect someone who wronged her, or you know, a person who doesn't want what happened to them getting out, doesn't want to go through like the trials and tribulations and whatnot. I thought that was quite interesting, because people like that, they do exist, and I think that it's a very complex thing, and it's not always as easy as, oh, it's the right thing to speak up and all that. It you know, humans are never easy, and lives are a difficult thing, and it's not something to play around with and whatnot. So I thought that it was good to portray that. Max Hastings is another character which becomes kind of a villain, recurring villain, I should say, of the franchise, because I was gonna say, how do I say without spoiling, but I think that it's something that I can kind of tell you. He is basically the resident neighborhood rapist. There's no gentler way to put it. He is roofing girls and forcing himself on them. And how it ties into what Pip is investigating, obviously I won't spoil, but he is that representation of how the justice system is mishandling a lot of things still, and we have a long way to go as a society. And he is the reason for a lot of Pip's up-and-coming rage. So that is, I think, pretty much it in terms of what I can tell you about this book. So now I will move on to the sequel. Good Girl, Bad Blood is the sequel and the middle part of the trilogy. Sorry if the camera angle changed a little bit. I needed to adjust. But essentially, this book is 412 pages long, published in 2020, the year of a lot of things happening. So it follows Pip after Andy Bell case has been solved fully and for real this time. And it features her processing what happened at the end of the last book, as she now has her podcast recounting the case. And she doesn't want to do any more, but that is changed when her friend comes to her saying that his brother has gone missing. So this is definitely more close to home, and Pip she can't not help, but she ends up uncovering even more things about the town. It's like, how many bad, horrible, corrupted things can one town happen to it? Apparently a lot. So, what can I tell you about this book? I will say that the mystery definitely is a little more out there. It feels, the classic sophomore book syndrome, where they have to, they feel like they have to, make it somehow even more unbelievable, even more, to keep the readers interested. And it's still a well-crafted mystery and a well-crafted ending. Like, it does make sense within that context. But for me personally, while I adored the first book and how it was handled, I only liked the second one. Which, I mean, I still gave it, well, you'll find out what I ranked it. But, yeah, I thought it was a sequel, as good as a sequel can be. So I thought I'll just sprinkle a bit of that of my personal opinion in there. What does this book do for Pip's character? Well, we see her interacting more with her friends because the mystery is more tied to them. So her friends get a bit more screen time, but then again, her group, they are kind of like an extension of Pip. They are also like their own characters, but we see them through Pip's eyes only when Pip is around, so you get what I mean. It is, they're there to add to the picture. The story's not about them per se. However, we do see more of her friends, and they are all interesting. And we also see more of Ravi, who he is a lot less in this book because the mystery doesn't involve around him, but he is still there, devoted to Pip as always, to be that emotional softener anchor that she needs, because Pip in this book is angry. She is very angry, and that rage is palpable. It can be felt throughout the book. She's pissed off about the justice system, about the mishandlings, considering that the police basically tell her that your friend's brother is an adult and we can't do anything about him whatsoever. And I hate that when a person clearly goes missing in true crime cases and the police say, well, they're an adult, so they probably just drove off to do whatever. It's like, no, it's out of character for them. But yeah, it's unfortunately not unrealistic. And also, with Max Hastings, as I said, he's the recurrent villain. And things that happen with him are also a big rage point for Pip in the book. And unfortunately, it's also not unrealistic. So, yeah, it's an interesting character direction, I should say, because it shows that unpleasantness. Pip is allowed to be unpleasant in this book. She's allowed to be angry. She's allowed to be frustrated. She's allowed to be annoyed. And I feel like in a lot of books, even nowadays, female protagonists aren't allowed to be written like that unless it's like specifically an like unhinged, girly thriller, horror, whatever, where that's the theme. But she is not meant to be this unhinged girly, but she's allowed to act like it. And while we might not necessarily be like, oh my god, she's so right to act like how she's acting all the time, because sometimes she is only making it worse for herself, we can completely understand where it's coming from. So that is kind of all I can tell you about this book. I will say, though, that the mystery and the plot twist and whatnot, I think it's more just there to be the sophomore middle book in the trilogy, as opposed to having that much of a relevance in what ends up happening in As Good as Dead, which is the third book published in 2021, and it is... I double-checked, because I was like, surely that's not right, but the book is 576 pages long, which is easily her longest book to date, and it is the conclusion to the trilogy, and it follows an even closer predicament for Pip, because in this book, she's the one being stalked, and they keep threatening to make her disappear, saying, who's gonna look for you if you're the one who is gone? Something along those lines. So Pip is obviously panicking, and she is unraveling very quickly after what happened to her in the last book, as she witnessed some horrible things. She's addicted to medication because she can't sleep. She is being very curt and very stressed and angry to everyone around her. And add this to the mix, it's not looking good. And not to mention, it also seems that a serial killer case in their town. I know. Again, how many things does this town have wrong with it? It might actually be unsolved because they put the wrong guy in prison. And it might be the real killer who is after Pip. And what I can tell you about this book is that I believe it takes a huge tonal shift somewhere down the middle. And it changes the trajectory of this franchise in a very interesting way that received mixed reactions from a lot of people, including myself. I thought that it turned the series from what is a murder investigation, sort of missing person investigation kind of vibe, to almost like How to Get Away with Murder, vigilante justice type of situation. And that's all I'm gonna say. But to me, I didn't necessarily love it. I know some people loved it a lot, but it didn't quite work for me. It was entertaining to read while it was happening, what ended up happening, but I just felt like it did a bit of a disservice to Pip's character because while I understood how she got to that point, I also caught myself thinking that it's such a shame that this is how this was chosen to be handled. But with how Holly Jackson took the franchise, the characterization was consistent and what was happening was still well thought out. And there were certain plot threads that ended up being tied together. But I will say that out of all her books so far that she's released, I definitely wouldn't be rereading this one because, as I said, I just don't think it would have much rereadability value for me. And because it is the final book in the franchise, I can't really tell you much else, I'm afraid, because this is where it all comes together, and there's too much to spoil for me to keep ranting about it. Then after the prequel novella, which was also released in 2021, we have her I'm Not Like the Others thriller, which is Five Survive, published in 2022. Yes, that's correct. It follows 6 friends who are going to their spring break trip, in an RV, and they get gunned down by a sniper, and the sniper says that one of them has a secret that they want, and if they don't reveal it to them, they're going to kill everyone. So yeah, definitely different, right? It's definitely a change from Holly Jackson's usual slow burn, small town investigation vibe, but I mean, maybe it's not really fair to compare considering the only thing we had from her up until that point was a trilogy. However, it does feel there's a stark difference. So you have these 6 characters who are definitely less developed, but then again, we had 3 books with the other ones, so, it's not really fair, but, you can't help make that comparison anyway. So you have Red, she is still carrying a lot of internal guilt and trauma over her mother passing in the line of duty. And it's been 5 years. Both her and her father aren't coping with the loss well, considering that her father struggles to even pay the bills, which I personally think that it's just horrible parenting. And I understand that you're grieving for your spouse, but you still have a child who relies on you, and the fact that you can't even pay a bill or get a proper job and keep it, it's bad. And I feel really sorry for Red, which, to be fair, summarizes my feelings about her character in this book, is that I felt bad for her and I felt sorry for her, but I wasn't really interested in her because I feel like her character was completely defined by her trauma, to the point where that trauma that she's internalizing is affecting all of her actions. And for a protagonist, she was extremely passive, which was very different in contrast to someone like Pip. So her friends and acquaintances who are on this RV with her, you have, I'm just checking names quickly. So you have her friend Maddie, who, apart from being Red's best friend and being rich, she doesn't really have much going for her character wise. You have Maddie's brother Oliver, who kind of becomes an asshole turned full on villain throughout the story, because he is this rich entitled jackass who thinks the world owes him everything. I'm sure we've met men like that, aka most of them, but that's for another time. And then you have Irena, who is Oliver's girlfriend, kind of being bossed around by him for most of the story. And then Arthur, who is Red's kind of love interest, some light flirting going on there. And Simon, who is, I would say, he's kind of there, and he's a bit of a comic relief. That's pretty much it. So, as usual, everyone has their secrets, everyone is somehow connected, and the mystery comes out. As I said, since this is like an action survival thriller, there are a lot of scenes that you can tell that Holly Jackson, it was new for her to write these sort of scenes, and it didn't always stick the landing for me personally. It felt very different, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a not such a good way. I would say she's still shown when the characters were talking to each other, where they were being horrible to each other, and when the secrets were being revealed, which obviously I won't spoil, of course. But I would say that as far as plot twists go, this is definitely like the most out there one that she's come up with so far, because it's possible and it ties into the themes of authority, the themes of corruption, and it has happened, stuff like that has happened in real life, but just the consequences and circumstances of that, they felt very, we need to make this happen and we'll make it happen. It just felt very, I had to stretch that disbelief, if you know what I mean. And I thought some things were quite convenient as well. And that's not even going into the logistics of them being trapped in the RV. So, as far as I'm concerned, this book is a solid effort. It definitely does things differently, which I think as authors, all authors should aspire to once in a while try something different. And even if it doesn't always stick the landing, it's fine, It's still definitely a solid piece of work, but I can definitely see why for a lot of people, if you look at reviews, it definitely didn't match the expectations they had after Good Girls Guide to Murder, which again, it's understandable, but I wouldn't say that the hate that it got from some people is warranted. However, it's definitely not her best. Objectively, it's just not. So yeah, now we are on to our last one is the one I read actually fairly recently, and that is The Reappearance of Rachel Price, published this year. And it follows Belle, whose mother, she disappeared when Belle was a toddler, and everyone assumed that her father was responsible. So he went through trial. It was a nasty, ugly ordeal. He was found innocent, and they've been just living their lives, making ends meet, until a true crime documentary crew decides to make a show out of her mother's disappearance. So they need the money, so they decide to answer the interview questions and just be part of it to get that money. And then her mother reappears out of nowhere while they're filming this documentary. And at first Belle's like, wow, I have my mom back, but then she has questions because her mother's story doesn't quite add up. I feel like this one is not only Holly Jackson returning to form,
to what she does best, but also embellishing on it. Because even though this thriller is YA, I feel like it kind of crosses that border between YA and adult thriller, and it genuinely felt so suspenseful and so nauseating at points, because you have Belle, who is back to our usual kind of, not typecasting, I should say, but she is an active protagonist. She's abrasive, she's annoying, she is pushing everyone away, Peyton Sawyer style, people always leave, so I might as well just leave them first type of thing. And she is very suspicious of everything. She has a lot of abandonment issues and a lot of trauma that she hasn't processed, or rather, she acknowledges it, but she doesn't want to actually deal with it. So, everything that she does throughout the story matches with that character development. Because someone who is like that, you wouldn't assume that they would just accept that their mother is now back from wherever she was with no questions. So, while she wasn't always the most likable, she definitely made sense, and I felt for her. Rachel, the mother's character, was also really interesting. However, I can't talk much about her because plot. But I do think that she served exactly what needed to be served in terms of the plot and in terms of what Holly Jackson was going for. And although she couldn't be developed as much as some of the other characters because she was the plot, what was done with her, I thought it was done really well. So then we also have the father character, Charlie, who is Belle's light. He's been with her through it all. He's never abandoned her. And it's the classic case of not everything is as it seems. And I'm going to leave it there. You have Belle's family from Charlie's side, who are also the classic, it's not always as it seems, the suburban perfection is never as it appears. You have an interesting subversion of the disgusting true crime reporters who will, climb over anything and anyone to get their scoop and to get their story, because these ones, they definitely do have that bit of a cutthroat attitude in the beginning, but as the book goes on, they become more humanized than some of the other characters. And you also have a bit of a romance with Belle and one of the crew, which, again, it's very understated, and he's kind of there to help her, so it doesn't overpower the plot. Like, they're kind of an investigative duo a bit, so that definitely works. As for the twists, I feel like this one is definitely the closest to home, because the plot that ends up happening, it has happened in real life a million times to multiple people, and I feel like it was executed quite well. And like I said, I was genuinely creeped out, even though this is not a horror book, because this sort of stuff happens. And once again, without saying much more, I will say that Holly Jackson once again took a bit of vigilante justice trope into her hands, because yet again, authorities are portrayed as useless and sometimes outright vindictive, and it's an unfortunate but realistic thing, which happens all the time. So yes, I don't think, again, I can say much more about this book without spoiling everything. It's kind of difficult, but it is definitely, it shows that Holly Jackson can do a good standalone thriller, and she has embraced what works for her, and she took what worked for her from other books and she made it work here while embellishing and making it its own piece of work. Now on to my personal ranking. So I will be quick with this because I already spoke about these books in as much detail as I could. And in the last place, I'm breaking up the trilogy, by the way, just to make you all aware. In the last place, I have As Good as Dead. I think I gave this book 3 stars, because when I was reading it, I wasn't like strictly writing down my rankings, but I did remember feeling very mid for reasons I already said. So 3 stars, I definitely wouldn't reread this one. Then we have 5 Survive. which I gave 4 stars. For reasons I already said, I just personally thought that it wasn't her best, and weirdly enough, the action scenes kept putting me to sleep. As I said, I just didn't think that she showed what she could do in that book, although I admire her for trying. Then Good Girl, Bad Blood is at, I believe I gave it a 4.5 because, as I already said, it's an amazing book and it's a really good sequel, but it just wasn't as good as the first one, which again, it was hard. Like, it would be tough to. First book is pretty much always the best one. And now, the last two, obviously, I'm sure you know what they are already. They are technically a tie. They are both 5 stars. However, I would say that if I had to rank them, if I had to rank them as a trilogy versus standalones, Reappearance of Rachel Price would be in the first spot. However, taking Good Girl's Guide to Murder as a standalone, let's pretend that the trilogy was never there, it would easily win over that. But, we have what we have, the canon that we're working with, and I think that I can put them as a tie because Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a fantastic introduction to this world and these characters, a great mystery, great mixed media, found footage elements. But then Reappearance of Rachel Price is an amazing standalone thriller that explores so many themes and really opens up the reader's eyes and shows what she can do as an author once she explores the adult thriller genre. So, at the end of the day, this is my channel and I can do what I want. Or some of YouTubers say, and they're right. It's all correct. So, I am putting them as a tie. And that is so far everything that Holly Jackson has written. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she does next. I am definitely picking her books up. Don't worry, it's not going to be another case of suddenly I just stopped reading them. I'm not stopping Ashley Winstead despite not liking her latest release, and I made a video on her. As for who is going to be my next author, actually I do have one that I can talk about already, which I won't share to keep things interesting, but after her, I don't know yet because I have not finished anyone's bibliographies just yet. I am keeping track of it. There are a couple authors that I only have 2 or 3 books left, so I might just zero in on one and try to but I also don't want to force myself because I don't want to read too much of one author too quickly, especially if they have a big backlog, because it might not then have the best chance of impressing me if I burn myself out. I'm sure you know what I mean. So, yeah, that is it for today. If you liked this video, please maybe subscribe, share what you think about Holly Jackson